Today, we'll be talking about the best mom in the whole wide world, Shadow Weaver. Sarcasm aside, in my Hordak video I discussed how Hordak perpetuated the cycle of abuse to Shadow Weaver, who perpetuated to Catra, who perpetuated to Scorpia before Scorpia broke the cycle. I feel like the online discourse is Shadow Weaver is so bad that talking about it is problematic. But I'm gonna do it anyway. Today's video will be in defense of Shadow Weaver. A fun little thought project. My goal in this is to understand why Shadow Weaver messed up so royally and less about the fucked up things she did do, because if you've seen the show, you know, and I've talked about it in a bunch of the other videos, but I want to try and peek into her mind and figure out why she did all the things she did. I think it would be extremely incompetent to say the show needed a villain, so they made a villain do evil things. It's not that simple. Shadow Weaver isn't the Joker, and the Joker isn't even that deep, but so many people stand him like Shadow Weaver ought to be a hell of a ball to dissect. Because Shadow Weaver is Adora's mom. I'll start there. Adora was raised surprisingly well. She can make friends with just about anyone, so she'd been pretty well socialized, even though she has some baggage and some nasty feelings of self-worth to work through. But like, who doesn't? But in the heat of things, or like having tough conversations, Adora is, I guess she's kind of emotionally sound. She's thoughtful while not brilliant. She cares about others and constantly tries to figure out the best way to help her friends and the people of Etheria. Adora is very strong, raised as an athlete, and even though she was fed gray protein bars almost exclusively, she seems really healthy, so all things considered, it's clear Adora has been taken care of pretty well, and I don't think we should discount that just because Adora is great independently. Shadow Weaver can't get any credit at all. Adora was brought to the Fright Zone as a baby, and Shadow Weaver looked after her. Like it or not, Weaver gets a little credit for Adora's heroism because she raised her. The only thing Shadow Weaver wasn't really able to pass along the door was a sound mind. I find this interesting because a lot of the time, parents are blamed for their children's mental state. But we have to realize that Shadow Weaver is in a very bad mental funk too, which it doesn't dismiss the abuse, but it makes sense that neither of them would know how to handle their emotions very well. So why would either of them has as much emotional maturity as anybody in the Princess Alliance? We know later on that Adora distrusts Shadow Weaver in Season 4 when Weaver joins the Alliance, but that's more so because Adora witnessed all the bad things she did to Catra. We know Shadow Weaver was manipulative towards Adora. It was very clear in Episode 7 when Shadow Weaver sent a phantasm to fuck with Adora's brain, but even in Season 5 we see Adora has overcome a little bit of her issues with her mom and listens to Shadow Weaver. They overall have a much healthier relationship later in the show while Catra and Shadow Weaver are still at each other's throats. This illustrates that Adora used to think all the stuff Shadow Weaver did to Catra growing up was okay, but after seeing how unhinged her mom was throughout Season 1 and getting to see how it messed up Catra's psyche in Episode 11, Adora fully understood just how bad Shadow Weaver was. Adora doesn't trust Shadow Weaver, more so because of what she did to Catra and not so much for herself. Adora knows the evil that her mom is not only capable of, but the light's in. And when Glimmer starts getting buddy-buddy to Shadow Weaver in Season 4, Adora is concerned over Glimmer because she doesn't want Glimmer to become the next Catra. Through Season 3, 4, and 5, Adora is untrusting of Shadow Weaver, but slowly accepts that she is a changed woman, or at the very least, working to change, and trusts her towards the end of the series. It makes sense that Shadow Weaver tried her best with Adora, so she's attached to her daughter. She wants to see Adora succeed and wants her daughter to reciprocate her love, even if Shadow Weaver's really bad at showing love in the first place. Anyways, it makes sense that Shadow Weaver would, over time, start to align more with her daughter's morals, especially when Catra illustrates in Episode 10 how rough she was. I know that sounds weird, but Shadow Weaver realizes from Catra how she was an awful mother, and she starts to regret it. In Season 5, we still see Shadow Weaver pulling similar shenanigans with Catra, but the transition from evil to good doesn't happen overnight, so it makes sense that Shadow Weaver would still do a few malicious things here and there. Despite having an abusive home life, Shadow Weaver and Adora both realize how messed up their past is, and they're working to become better people. I'm not saying Shadow Weaver's redeemed by the end of the show, but it is worth notice that she was trying, and we can actually notice the shift in the story's overall narrative. If we look at Shadow Weaver's behavior in isolation, she doesn't really treat anybody badly except for Catra. She still says some messed up stuff to other people, but like 95% of Shadow Weaver's nasty behavior is exclusively directed towards Catra. She's kind to Glimmer, and while Shadow Weaver desires power and status and revenge, she's not going out of her way to torment Adora like she would do to Catra. I point all of this out to say, if Catra didn't exist for Shadow Weaver to have beef with, Shadow Weaver might have been a half-decent mom, or at least not nearly as bad as she's shown to be. I don't like the notion that Shadow Weaver's entire character is summed up exclusively by how she treats Catra. We even see in the finale that Shadow Weaver is proud of her daughters, and she willingly gives herself up to protect their future, knowing that she's done so much she could never be redeemed, and this is her last act and the best thing that she could do for them. Like, I mean, I guess objectively speaking, but yeah, I also thought it was kind of a weird scene, but it does illustrate Shadow Weaver's regret for all the awful things she did, and this was just the cherry on top of an attempted redemption arc. To be honest, I was hoping it was like a fake out. She pretends to die so she could come back as the final boss in a season 6, so Catra and Adora would be able to work together and sort out their emotional baggage as they beat their mean mom in a cathartic finale. But you know, through the lens of redemption, I actually do like this final scene with her, even if she didn't make it through to the good mother side and still has some regrets at the finish line. I don't think any redemption arc in She-Ra was done well, but that's because redemption arcs are really difficult to do in general, and that's why Zuko's is like the only redemption arc that I think I actually liked. The issue with it is the writers invest so much time in trying to convey what an awful person a character is, and then when the show starts, they have them do awful things as per the story and episodes. But when it comes to redeeming the character, they try to do it in like one fell swoop or within like an episode or two, whereas Zuko had an entire season and then some to redeem himself. It's also hard to redeem abusers, in addition to the fact that the writers just didn't spend that much time on Shadow Weaver's redemption arc. If the show didn't paint Shadow Weaver as malicious for the fun of it, I feel like people would have a much easier time giving Shadow Weaver a pass towards the end. But I appreciate the direction the writing went. Regardless of what we extrapolate, it's not that deep. Shadow Weaver made for a very interesting villain whose contributions to the storyline were about giving the other characters emotional issues so that their stories could be deeper. Shadow Weaver was a tool to make Catra, Adora, Hordak, Glimmer, and Scorpia's journeys more fulfilling. Shadow Weaver's depth does not come from herself as a character, but how she added complexities to the show by impacting everyone around her and making everyone else's journey more meaningful. That's why I like Shadow Weaver. If she was nicer to everybody, watching Catra and Adora grow past their issues, it wouldn't have been nearly as fulfilling. You know, Shadow Weaver just kind of needed to be a raging asshole. Check out the Hordak and Catra and Adora videos I've made and all that fun stuff. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.